Have you ever wanted to build an app but didn't know how? With AI tools, it's now possible. My name is Devin, and I'm going to teach you to vibe code an app from start to finish without writing a single line of code. But most importantly, I'm going to show you exactly what to do when AI gets stuck so you can actually cross the finish line. Let me show you the app I built over this weekend. It's not quite finished, but it's a great prototype, and you can build the same thing yourself. Okay, here's my app, and it's for learning languages. So on the top right corner, I can pick any language I want to learn. I can click on Grammar Guide, and it will explain everything about the language. And I actually don't know anything about German, but I don't need to because the AI not only wrote all this code for me, but it also put in all the educational content. Along with that, I have a story section where you can play through different exercises to learn the language. I'm going to pick this cafe story and I'm going to switch to Spanish, and you'll see a picture and a sentence in English and Spanish. Right now it's in beginner mode. I can switch to advanced and it gives me the same storyline, but with much more advanced vocabulary. Now I've switched to intermediate. If I click on any word in Spanish or English, it will highlight the corresponding translation in the other language, so you can see how words are related. And if I click,
you walk into a cozy cafe in Madrid.
Entras en un café acogedor en Madrid.
You can hear that it actually played the audio for each of these. I didn't have to record the audio myself. It generated it through AI. And I actually do speak Spanish as a second language, not perfectly. I'm not a native speaker, but to me, the accent sounds pretty decent. And in English, same thing. I think it sounds good. I'm not going to show you every feature of this app. I've been coding professionally for 30 years, and a lot of these features would have taken months to code by hand. And I coded this all in a weekend. Except I didn't write a single line of code. I just described it to the AI and it coded it for me. So let me show you how you could do the same thing. I'm going to close this app and start all over from scratch. The first thing I think you should do is go to gemini.google.com. This is going to be our tutor. And you could use any other AI app. There's DeepSeek, there's ChatGPT, there's Grok. Facebook has Llama. You could use Claude. I'm not going to show you every one of them. They all function essentially the same. And from 1 month to the next, each AI gets smarter than the other. So at any time, a different one could be the best. I've tried most of them. In my opinion, Gemini is pretty good right now, but most importantly, it allows you to ask a lot of questions for free, where some of the others, after you ask a few questions, it wants you to start paying money. We're not actually going to use Gemini to code. We're going to use it as our tutor. Pretend you're having a one-on-one session with a college professor. So I'm going to use this just for asking questions. So I'm going to write, I want to code a language learning app. Can you help me? ? So the first thing you're going to learn interacting with an AI is that the more specific you can be with your questions, the better answers you're going to get. For example, I didn't tell it anything about the requirements for my app. I didn't tell it if I want it to work on the phone or on the computer. And so it's just going to give me broad information that may not be at all what I'm interested in. So the first thing I need to do is narrow down my requirements so that the AI gives me exactly what I want. But I'm going to pretend I don't know coding at all. So I'm just going to do this little by little. So I'm going to read through everything it says and look at its suggestions. So first of all, it wants me to pick an architecture. I don't know what any of these things mean. So I don't know what React is. I don't know what Flutter is. How do I know which architecture is best? So I could take React, for example, copy it, open a new tab, paste it, and I could read search results about React and learn about it. But the whole point is I want AI to do everything for me. I don't want to research on my own, but I am still learning by reading what it tells me. So maybe the first question I would ask is, why would I choose React compared to other technologies? Can you list pros and cons of each technology? Notice I didn't even read anything else that it told me because I'm just trying to make one decision at a time. So after I get this question answered, I'm still going to scroll to the top, read the other things, and ask similar questions about Python, SQL, etc. So here it's given me all the choices of technologies I can use and pros and cons. I'm just going to pick whichever one I like the best or that fits my requirements the best. But if I'm not sure, maybe I would say, I need it to work on a phone and a computer. Please pick the best technology for that. Okay, it's telling me Flutter. In the end, it doesn't matter if you're an entry-level programmer just prototyping something. It doesn't matter if you pick the wrong thing, because let's say I code the entire thing in Flutter using an AI. Later on, I get an expert programmer that critiques my app and tells me I made the wrong choice. For example, my personal opinion as a 30-year programmer, I would choose Angular by far. And that's going to ruffle some feathers with some other expert programmers. React is extremely popular. I personally hate it. But that doesn't matter. Everyone can have their personal preference. Let's say down the road, I decided I picked the wrong technology because I got an expert opinion. That's okay. If I wrote the entire app with AI in the wrong technology, once I pick a new technology, I can just tell it to rewrite the whole thing in the new technology. It'll take some work, but it's fine. So don't be afraid to just experiment and move forward. You just want to see progress and not stress about perfection. Okay, I'm not going to go through every little part of this, but if you really want to learn, you would want to make sure you understand every sentence, you research each decision. So next, I would want to discuss features. So I'd say something like, I want audio to play in each language. I want to use classic novels like Alice in Wonderland. I want an AI drawn picture for each page. Can you write me a requirements document? Can you draw me some wireframes? I could, as a human, write up my requirements document. When you think about some of these decisions I'm making, old novels, that decision sounds simple, but there could be a lot of detail that's missing. And to build the app correctly, you need everything spelled out. As an example, where am I going to get these novels from? Are they legal to use, or are there copyright issues? Do the novels exist in other languages? And if not, where do I get the translated text? All of those things need to be fleshed out, but the AI is great at thinking. So it's going to figure out what's missing, fill in the blanks. And then if I don't like how it filled in the blanks, I can change them. So this requirements document is like 2 pages long, even though I only gave it a couple sentences. So it's suggesting that the app I build should have an AI that automatically breaks the novel up into individual pages. It's also suggesting I use public domain, and it gives me a specific website where I can get the text from. And it's telling me there's a technology called text to speech that can generate the AI audio for me. So I don't need a professional to record the audio. It's suggesting that I have a feature in the app where they can click on a word to basically pull up a dictionary definition of that word. Well, that's a cool idea. I did not ask it for that in my initial description. That's the nice thing, is it's brainstorming ideas for me without me even telling it. So ideally, I should copy and paste this whole thing into a document, and then I should edit it and remove things I don't like. Or better yet, if there's things I don't like, I should just tell Gemini to update my document. So for example, it suggested I have an offline mode. So if they don't have an internet connection, the book still works. Maybe for whatever reason, I don't like that idea. So I'll just say, I don't want offline mode. Please remove that from the requirements. Now you'll see I've got a brand new document. And initially you might think I could have just deleted this line of text myself. The problem is the term offline might be scattered throughout the document everywhere. And as soon as I start changing things manually, I could accidentally create a big mess on my hands. And also, an AI is a tool. I don't want to use a hammer if I have a nail gun when I'm building a house, because a nail gun is more efficient and powerful. Use AI to make yourself as efficient as possible. People worry that AI is going to take away programmers' jobs. I don't think that's true. I'm not scared at all. I see this as a huge opportunity for more people to get involved in programming and for technology to get exponentially better. What's going to happen is people that embrace AI will become better programmers, and they will get the best jobs and the pay raises. And people that refuse to use AI or don't learn how to use it correctly will be less efficient, and they will be the ones to lose their jobs. But AI is not replacing anyone. It's augmenting them to make them better. So now let's start actually coding the app. And again, we're pretending I don't know anything about coding. So I'm going to ask it, what coding tools do I need to install? How can I vibe code this by using an AI coder on my computer? So I already know the answer as a programmer, but let's just see if it will teach us. So first of all, it suggests we install Flutter and Python. If I don't know how to install those, maybe I open a new tab and I say install Flutter and click the download. Maybe I just ask right here, how do I install Flutter? There is something to be aware of with AI, and that is something called a context window. And that's essentially the same thing as like a short-term memory when you think about a human brain. If I have a long conversation with someone over multiple hours, they're not going to remember every single thing I talked about. They're going to just remember the most important stuff, and their brain's going to forget the irrelevant stuff. They might remember concepts, but they're not going to remember every single word. And AI does the same thing. Once its short-term memory gets full, it's going to start purging the irrelevant stuff and summarizing. What that means is if I ask a question and I've had a really long conversation, it might give me a bad answer because it's forgotten some of what I've talked about. Anytime you go off onto a random tangent, I recommend opening a brand new chat session to basically keep the short-term memory separated between each topic. So rather than saying, how do I install Flutter in this conversation, I'm going to open a brand new tab with Gemini, brand new conversation, and ask that question. My main tab is for brainstorming requirements and architecture features of my app. It's not to teach me how to code. If I want to ask coding questions, I'm going to do that in a completely separate conversation. Okay, so it told me I need to install Flutter. It also told me it wants me to install an agent. Just to speed up my process here, I'm going to show you my typical workflow, which would not actually be Flutter and would not actually be Cursor. But it doesn't matter. You can follow these instructions and they will work perfectly for you. There's not one perfect technology. Whatever you want to use, whatever you're familiar with, is fine, or just follow what the AI tells you to do. I'm just going to show you my preferred. So what I like is QWEN and Visual Studio. So you can look up the instructions if you want. The point is to use AI to teach you whatever you don't know. So this program is called Visual Studio Code. You can just Google it to download it. It's really simple to set up. It's what the majority of programmers use nowadays. There is an older version of Visual Studio that's not called Code. This is it. This is more for professional coders. It's much more difficult to use than Visual Studio Code, but it has some more advanced features. So I use both of these side by side depending on a specific task. But QWEN CLI is going to be our coding agent. So let's install that. I'll just copy this command it gave me, and I need to run it in a command prompt. The typical way to do that is on your start menu, just search for command prompt. But my preferred way is inside of Visual Studio Code. You can click terminal at the top, new terminal. And most of these concepts will be similar in Mac or Linux. Terminal, shell, and command prompt are synonymous. So I'm going to paste the command that it gave me and hit enter. And I don't need to really understand what this command is. I can just run it. But if I was curious, I could ask it, what does npm mean, etc. Explain this command. It did not explain this to me, but from past experience, I know this command will not work if you have not already installed npm. I didn't get any error message here, so I would probably just assume it worked. But if I got some kind of error message, I would copy and paste that error message into Gemini so it could explain to me how to resolve the issue. So instead, I'm just going to copy the message it gave me, which I can tell it probably means successful, but it doesn't actually say that. I'll just paste it in, and I don't need to tell it, please explain this. It just will know that I want an explanation. You don't need to give it extra irrelevant information unless it gives you a bad answer, and then you can modify your prompt and be more descriptive. So I pasted that in, which to an average human, that might not mean much, but Gemini was able to tell me that means it was successful. So that's great. I can move on. And earlier, when it told me how to install, it didn't tell me how to use the app at all. But when I pasted the success message, not only did it tell me it was successful, it told me how to use it. It says I should run this command to see what version was installed. I should run this command to actually open the app. So I didn't ask it for instructions. It just assumed that's what I wanted. So don't be afraid to just talk to the AI. There's no harm. If it's not giving you what you want, you can just click edit and say, please explain this. How do I run the app? So just keep talking to it until it gives you the information you need. Okay, I'm going to run the app. So I just click copy and paste it into my terminal and hit enter. Okay. It's very important to read messages as you go along. Sometimes it might be irrelevant, but sometimes it's important. So in this case, it's saying you really need to set up a project folder because you're just running under your user folder, which makes sense. I don't want all my code mixed up in the same folder because if I'm working on several different apps, I want them all separated. I just need to close the program and switch to a different folder. And if you weren't sure how to close the program, or you weren't sure how to switch to a different folder, just go into Gemini and ask it. But I know Control C is to quit, which it says right at the bottom. And I know to change a folder, I can say make directory language learning. I'm not going to hit enter to run it because I'm going to show you a different way. But after I make the directory, I could use CD to that folder. It's just change directory. But instead, I'm going to show you the power of something like QWEN, which is an AI agent. So I'm going to run it and I'm going to stay in the wrong directory. What an AI agent does is it can remote control your computer and run commands for you. You pretend you're the boss and the AI is the employee, and you micromanage the AI and you tell it what to do. So I don't need to create the folder. The AI needs to create the folder. So I'll say, please create the project directory for a language learning app. The way this works is QWEN is the AI brain and it's on a computer somewhere on the internet. It sends my message to that computer. That computer reads the message and analyzes it, and then it sends back a response. But that response can include remote control instructions to my computer. And the server and my computer will talk back and forth while it remote controls until the whole process is finished, and then it'll let me ask it another question or give it another command. So in this case, because it's trying to remote control my computer, it's asking for permission. The reason is it doesn't want to accidentally mess up your computer. So this is like safe mode. I personally run it with full permissions when I do coding because I get annoyed by having to say yes all the time. So far, it hasn't messed up my computer. But I'll show you ways to be safe if you're nervous. I can just use the arrow keys. You can't use the mouse because this is a terminal. All you can do with the mouse is highlight and copy and paste. But I'll just use the arrow keys to go to yes and hit enter. So it created the directory for me, and then it explains what it did. So if I have no technical skills, this is essentially acting like a tutor, showing me step by step what it's doing. So by reading those commands, I can start to gain the technical skills and understand what a programmer does. So now it's trying to make a file. Here's where you need to be careful. You need to pay attention to what it's doing and think about why it's doing it. Question whether or not it's following your instructions. I gave it a very simple request and it's doing a lot more than that. All I said was I want to make a language learning app and I want you to make a folder for it. It's now trying to create a file called package.json and git ignore, readme, and vite.config. There's nothing wrong with just letting it do its thing. You can always undo any mistakes it made if it did stuff you didn't want. But if you understand what it's doing and you know it's not what you want, it's totally fine to cancel it and give it new instructions. As a programmer, I'm familiar with what Vite is. When it suggested technologies before, it suggested Flutter, but in my personal opinion, I prefer Angular. Vite is a competitor to all of these. And I guess Gemini didn't even put it on the list of recommendations. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit escape, which is also no and suggest changes. That will cancel what QWEN is trying to do when it's remote controlling my computer. I can still read what it was trying to do, but I can give it further instructions. And it won't forget my previous instructions because its short-term memory is long enough that it'll remember what I've been working on for the last hour or so, depending on how many files it's had to read and how many commands I've sent. So I can say, I don't want Vite, I want Angular. and hit enter. Now you'll notice sometimes it takes a while to think. It's okay to tab out, browse the internet, research, whatever, while it's doing its changes. QWEN is actually pretty fast. It's what I prefer for actually coding. A lot of people really love Claude because it's considered smarter. The problem with Claude is it's very expensive. So if you don't have the money to pay for it, it's not really an option. QWEN is completely free, and in my opinion, it's a good enough coder. You're not going to have any issues with it. I would recommend only switching to something else if QWEN gets stuck and fails, but most likely it's not because QWEN is failing, it's because you're not giving it the right information. So if you try again with a better question, it will give you a better response. Now, because it's asking me yes, allow, it gets really annoying because I might have to keep clicking yes over and over again. So what I'm going to do is quit out with the Control-C command. And if I hit the up arrow, it'll retype my old command, which was QWEN. You'll notice here, I can resume my old session, so it's not lost if I want to have QWEN reload its short-term memory of the task I was previously working on, which is it's kind of like a separate browser tab. So I can have multiple running simultaneously working on different tasks. But I don't want that session. I want a brand new session. And anytime I open QWEN, I use the -- YOLO command. That stands for you only live once, basically saying I'm okay with the risk that it might crash my computer by running a bad command. Now, it's unlikely for that to happen, but if you have really important stuff on your computer you don't want to mess up, you could either use a separate computer just for your coding projects that doesn't have any important stuff. You could install a virtual machine, for example, VMware, which has a free community edition, and it basically creates a computer inside of your computer, a virtual computer, which has its own Windows or Linux install, and all of the files are separate. You could code inside there so that there's no risk of a command breaking something. But I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to run the YOLO so that it doesn't ask me yes every time. And if I hit up, all of the previous messages I've typed to QWEN are available in the history, so I don't have to retype my prompt. I can just hit enter. Okay, let me explain to you Git, which is important for coding and was mentioned earlier by QWEN. Obviously, the best way to learn if you're doing this on your own and you're not watching a YouTube video is you would ask Gemini, explain to me the .git ignore file that QWEN is creating. But I'm just going to shortcut by explaining it to you rather than you having to research it on your own. And the reason you would do it in Gemini web browser is you could technically do it from QWEN, explain to me the .git ignore. But remember I mentioned the short-term memory. If I have QWEN explain a bunch of irrelevant stuff to me, it's going to mess up its ability to write good code because it's confused on if I'm wanting it to code something or if I'm wanting it to explain stuff to me. So you want to keep different topics in separate browser tabs. The terminal has the same concept as a browser tab. This is why I like Visual Studio Code. All you have to do is click this plus sign on the top right corner. And now I have two browser tabs, except they're terminals, not browsers. I can run a separate QWEN. QWEN is just a brain, just like Gemini's website is a brain. Even though running it through the terminal allows it to remote control my computer, I don't need it to remote control my computer. I can also just ask it questions. Please explain the .git ignore file. And it won't modify anything on my computer. It'll just explain it to me. If I had done my original requirements documentation inside of QWEN, then instead of getting a requirements document in the browser that I have to copy and open up Notepad and paste, I could instead just tell QWEN, create the requirements .text file based on our discussion. So once you get familiar with the terminal, you might use the browser version less often because the terminal has the benefit of remote controlling your computer, which saves you time. Okay, back to Git extensions. I recommend downloading and installing this. And what it does is if I make a folder for where I'm going to have all my code, if I right click, it has all of these Git ext. And what I want to do is create a repository and hit create. This makes a .git folder, which you don't need to worry about, but that internally holds information about the history of all the code that I write. If I tell the AI to build part of the app, and then tomorrow I tell it to add a few more features, and the next day I tell it to add a few more, over time the app gets really big and complicated, and I might want the ability to search old versions of the code in case I make a mistake in the future, or I might want to be able to undo so I can go back to yesterday's version of the program. That's essentially what Git allows me to do. It has a lot of other really cool features, like if you're working on a team and everybody's coding different features at the same time, it will merge all your code together, but we're not going to worry about any of that. So I'm going to take this folder and I'm going to start over with QWEN from that specific folder. So CD changes your folder, and then you could paste in the folder name. And if you weren't sure how to do that, obviously you could just ask Gemini. So now I'm going to open up QWEN with YOLO mode. If I right click on my language learning folder and hit commit, right now there are no folders or files. It's just all empty, but I'll show you after QWEN doesn't work. So I just hit the up arrow to get the same message I used before, hit enter, and it's going to start creating files. Now it first checked to make sure that I have certain programs installed. I already mentioned NPM is something you might have to install. Node is another. It figured out that they are already installed, so it's able to just move forward. But if they weren't, it would either install them for me or it would give me instructions on how to install them. So it's going to help you step by step along the way as long as you read what it tells you. Now, right now, if you're not paying attention, you might not realize that it's stuck. And if I walked away for an hour and came back, it would still be on the same screen. Here's the reason. It ran this command for me, and the command is asking a question that it wants me to answer. And it says I have to press Control F to focus this question so I can answer yes or no. This is one annoyance I have with QWEN, is that because it's all in the terminal, you just have arrow keys. You can't use your mouse. There are other agent tools that have more buttons for clicking, so they're more user-friendly, but a lot of them cost money, and I just like how simple this is because it's agnostic to whichever technology or tools you're using. I'm choosing to do this inside of Visual Studio Code, but I don't have to, whereas a lot of the agents are embedded in a very specific program, so you have to open that program. Like technically, I wouldn't even have to use this for coding. I can use it for remote controlling my computer however I want. I could give it any kind of instruction. For some reason, Control F wasn't working. So instead, I just typed Y directly in the prompt, and it understood that the yes was intended for this question, and it moved forward on its own. Okay, this is so cool. My browser just opened. I did not tell it to open the browser. It just happened. Why? Because QWEN on its own decided it should run the app for me. And when it ran the app, it just popped open. Let's start with something really simple, and then we'll get a little more complex. If I was a real coder and I understood the technologies this app is built out of, I could right click and do inspect, and I could see all the HTML, which you don't need to understand. It's fine, just ignore it. But I could come in here and call my app Babelfish. It's from a movie. And it would change it in the app. And if I was a coder, I could click in Visual Studio Code up at this search filter for a .html file, and I could read through the code and try to find specifically where the app's name is and change it. And if I was a coder, the better way would be to click the search icon on the top left corner and copy the app name that I don't like and paste it into the search so that it can find specifically where in the code it's at. I found it, and this is where I could change it Rosetta Stone. But let's pretend you're not a coder, or let's pretend you're a lazy coder. You don't need to read the code. You don't need to modify the code. Let the AI do it for you. So I could just explain to it. I'll copy this phrase. The app chose this phrase. I want it to instead say happy birthday. It's going to search the code on its own. It's going to edit it. I don't need to care how it fixes it. It might do it a completely different way than another coder would, but it doesn't matter how it does it. There's not one right way to code. It just matters if it works how the user expects. When you publish your app and people use it, are they happy or do they get frustrated and uninstall? That's what matters, is the user experience, not the code underneath. So I accidentally got out of YOLO mode, so it's asking me to approve. I'm gonna hit no temporarily just to show you another way to get into YOLO mode. If I hit tab while I'm on this prompt, it switches between plan mode, regular mode, auto accept edits, and YOLO. Planning mode won't run any commands. It's just for brainstorming, but I prefer to never use that. I prefer to open a new terminal with this plus sign, open a new instance of QWEN, and do planning mode there. Whatever it determines in the end, I'll have it save it to a file, and then I'll have my main QWEN read that file for instructions, just to keep the short-term memories separated, or the context window. So I'll hit tab to get back to YOLO mode, and I'll retype my prompt just by hitting the up arrow on the keyboard, which goes through the history of my previous prompts. Okay, this time it didn't ask me for permission, it just did it. And if I go back to my app, I can see the changes it's made. So let's go back to Git for a second. If I hit refresh, I can see all the code now. And you don't need to understand any of this code. All you need to do is this button here, which says commit and push. Ideally, you should also give a comment. So I'm going to say first version of app, and then I'll click commit and push. Now remember, I changed this to say happy birthday, which was probably a bad idea because that doesn't make sense. I should have picked my actual app name. And I mentioned that Git keeps a history of every file change. Well, that's only true once you click commit. Commit is what takes a snapshot of the current state of your code for historical purposes. But because I changed that code without committing, I've lost the original file. What I should do is come back to this file and hit Control Z. So I have the original and hit save. Then I should refresh, and then I should do the commit and push. Now it asks me if I want to stage all my files first. The answer is going to be yes. The way to avoid this question, if I hit cancel, everything on the top left corner is files I've changed. Everything on the bottom left corner is files I want to take a snapshot of. If there's only specific files I want snapshotted, I can click on them and click this down arrow to stage. But generally speaking, you're going to just always include everything. And as you become a more advanced programmer, you'll understand the nuances of when you wouldn't, but don't worry about it. Again, I'm doing this wrong because I should let the AI do this. Why am I clicking any buttons? I should instead tell AI, please commit the files to Git. Okay, it's done. Now, if I right click on my language learning folder and do Git extensions view changes, I can see the commit that it made with all of the files. And it even put in a comment for me that says the code changes it made were happy birthday. So get used to the idea of having the AI do everything for you. You don't want to click buttons unless you have to. You don't want to type commands unless you have to. So let me show you the benefit to Git. This is actually wrong. It did not actually include the happy birthday. And that's because I undid this file change without notifying QWEN. It's not going to automatically read my files unless it has a reason to. So it doesn't know that behind the scenes I changed it. The way you tell it to read a file is you type the @ sign, and it will give you every single file in your directory, but it also lets you filter. So I know the file is called app.ts. I don't have to type the whole thing. I could type just ts, and then it'll show me all the ts files, and I can use arrow keys to scroll up and down, but there's too many of them. So I'm gonna do ap.ts, and here it pulls up. The reason to type a short name is some files can be really long. It just helps you find it quicker. If I hit enter after I select the correct one with the arrow keys, it fills in the full folder name. And that basically just tells QWEN, read this file along with whatever extra information I tell you. So here I could say, change the app name to happy birthday. So it's essentially the same command I did before, but I told it to read the file first. The reason why is it thinks it already changed it to happy birthday. It doesn't know I undid it. So if I just told it the command without forcing it to read the file, it would think I already did it, and it would just ignore my message. Now, I could also say, I changed some code, please read all the files again. But the more specific you can be, the less you mess up its short-term memory. Remember, when I typed the @ sign and typed .ts, there were 24 different files with that extension, but that's just ts. And a bunch of these are files that might be irrelevant. I don't know what they are. So if I tell it read every file, that's going to fill up its short-term memory really quickly. You want to have it only read the relevant stuff. And then if it decides that there's something else that's relevant, it will find it on its own. For example, at the top of this file, there are import commands that tell it to read from a specific folder. So if I ask it to do something related to router outlet, it's going to know it needs to read the Angular router outlet folder. I don't need to tell it that, it'll just do it on its own. But whatever hints you can give it are helpful. So now I've messed up my app name with happy birthday. Let me show you the power of Git. If I right click on my folder and say commit, it pulls up only the one file that's changed, whereas before it showed me 50 different files. So I can see exactly what changed. And then I could tell QWEN, please commit the changes to Git. I'm not going to hit enter because I don't really want that. But let's say I did, I could afterwards say, I made a mistake with the most recent commit. Can you revert back to yesterday's version? In this case, I haven't actually committed anything yet. So I can just say, can you reset Git changes? Enter. And it doesn't matter what the changes were, Git understands all of them. So QWEN is not specifically looking for the phrase happy birthday that it added and then undoing it. Instead, it's looking at the historical snapshot and just putting it back to the old version. Okay, now you have the fundamentals of how to vibe code, but I've done very simple stuff. If I wanted to get crazy, I would open a new tab and I could use QWEN, but I could also use Gemini. So Gemini has a command line tool that's identical to QWEN. It just uses a different brain. So I'll use YOLO like I always do. I prefer to use Gemini anytime I'm doing complex tasks that require a lot of thinking, but I prefer to use QWEN when I'm just writing quick, simple code. The reason is Gemini is smarter, but it's also slower. QWEN is faster, but it makes more mistakes. If I'm going to have Gemini do something, I just get used to typing a command and then leaving to go eat lunch and come back because I know it's going to take a long time, which is okay. It's fine to learn to multitask. So first I'm going to tell it, read my app code and explain it to me. Remember, we coded this whole thing with QWEN without knowing anything about coding. This is going to teach us like a college professor would. It's going to explain why is it in a browser? How did all this stuff appear on the screen? It might explain how HTML or JavaScript work. And I can ask it whatever questions I want. But again, it takes a long time to think. So you might leave for a while and come back. But while it's thinking, I can keep typing more prompts and it will queue them up in the background. So let's say I was actually actively coding right now and I wanted a different logo or different colors, whatever. I could type multiple commands and keep hitting enter, and it'll work on them when it has time. So even while it's thinking in the background, I can still work. Instead of making code changes, I'm just going to say, make me a requirements document for a language learning app. But I'm going to do something even cooler. What if I used an AI to draw a picture for me of what I want the app to be, or to analyze an existing app? I'm going to take the app I already created and I'm going to click print screen, which lets me highlight to take a screen capture, and I'm going to paste it into Gemini. I'm going to have it analyze the picture to give me a list of requirements. I could even do this with a commercial app. You could take something like, in this case, Duolingo would be a competitor. You could use that. Now, there are a lot of hidden things from the screenshot that only happen when you open them. So you would want to do multiple screenshots, click each button, do a screenshot of just what changed and paste that in. So now I've got a screenshot of each part of my app, and I'm going to say, please generate a requirements document from these pictures. It actually analyzed the pictures, figured out everything it does, and made me a requirements document. So what I can do is copy and paste this whole thing into Notepad, and I can save it into my folder and call it requirements.txt. But I can also right-click each image and say save as. I can make a folder called screenshots and save each one. Now I have all of my pictures saved. So let's go back to Gemini, and I can do the @ sign and pick requirements.txt. And I can say, please update the requirements document to match the wireframes in @ sign. Now, I don't have to tell it 1, 2, 3, 4. It will read the entire folder. It will analyze the images and update my file. Remember that I analyzed the images and generated the text for the file here. So it's technically already done this work. Sometimes the AI is not very thorough. It might miss things. So I like to tell it to redo its work multiple times if it's a complicated task. If I know for sure it missed something, I would give it more specific instructions. I would say, you forgot this skill level of beginner, intermediate, advanced. Please add that. But I don't need to tell it where it messed up. I can just tell it, do it again, and it will fill in the gaps of the mistakes it made the last time. And especially if I'm using Git in between every major change, I can see the history of what new things did it add to my requirements document that were not there before. So obviously Gemini is still thinking because, like I said, it's a bit slower than QWEN. I'm a little impatient. So while Gemini is doing its thing, I'm going to go back to QWEN and I'm going to say @requirements, @screenshots. Please update the entire app to match these requirements and screenshots, and hit enter. And again, it may not be perfectly thorough because I've just asked it to code an entire huge app. It's not going to understand every little feature. In fact, it's already saying that right here. This is a major undertaking, which is fine. I don't feel guilty. If I was making an employee do that, it would take him a month and he would work late nights and he would get tired and I would feel guilty for the major undertaking. But it's an AI. I don't need to feel guilty. So I think it'll actually do a pretty decent job here, but it'll probably miss a few things. So the whole point is I don't need to worry about the code. I don't need to read the code. I don't need to understand the code. If I want to become a good programmer long term, I should slowly learn, but only as much as my brain can handle. I don't need to stress myself out understanding every little detail. But what really matters is testing the app. As it's coding, I should be opening up my app, clicking refresh, seeing what changes it's made. If there's things I don't like that it changed, I should tell it to fix those. And it's a very iterative process. You're going to have to keep giving it instructions over and over again to slowly massage the project into the final product. Think of it like sculpting or painting an oil canvas. There are many layers to get to the final result. Now, it's fine to walk away and go to lunch while it's thinking, but you do want to come back occasionally just to check if it's stuck. So in this case, it's asking me, do you want to proceed, yes or no? I need to make sure I'm paying attention because otherwise it's just going to wait forever. So again, it says Control F to focus. I need to focus this and type the yes in there, or I need to hit escape, which cancels what it's currently doing so that it will read my next prompt, which is the yes. So because the Control F is not working, it's opening the search result. I could go to File, Preferences, Keyboard Shortcuts, and type Control+F, and I could remove the one for the terminal. So that would not allow me to use the keyboard shortcut for searching inside the terminal, but I could still click the search icon. So I'm just going to right click and say remove key binding. Now, when I hit Control F, it changes to focus. And if I hit Control F again, it unfocuses. And if you weren't sure how to do that, again, open up Gemini in the browser, explain the problem, let it give you instructions on how to fix it. The main key with coding is plan to get stuck constantly. There are always going to be things you don't know how to fix that are frustrating. You need to learn how to troubleshoot and solve problems. So ask questions to an AI first, to a human second, try lots of things, click every possible button. Don't be afraid to break something. That's the only way you learn. So QWEN is going crazy coding, which is great. I don't know how long it's going to take. I'm going to check on Gemini real quick. It looks like it's all finished. It made a bunch of changes to the requirements document. One caution, when you're doing things in parallel, I have QWEN reading the requirements document to update the app, and simultaneously I have Gemini updating the requirements document. This means QWEN might have read the old version of the file, or it may have read it while Gemini was halfway through making changes. So QWEN may have been a little confused. I love to run AIs in parallel for multitasking, especially because sometimes they're really slow. QWEN's still been thinking for 10 minutes. I don't want to just sit and watch for 10 minutes. I want to keep working. So ideally, you should have multiple AIs working on different parts of your app at the same time, but you don't want them working on the same files because they might mess each other up. And it's okay if they do. You can tell them to fix it after the fact. But if I think back to this main app, instead of just telling QWEN, build the entire app from the requirements document, I could open up 3 different QWEN terminals, and I could tell one, only build the home screen. I could tell another one, only build the stories screen. And I could tell another one, only build the grammar screen. Or even more granular, within the stories page, I could tell one, code the feature for using an AI voice to read the text. And I could tell a different one, code the microphone feature where the app listens to the person talk. Because they're completely different features, one is the microphone, one is the speakers, one's generating audio, one's listening to audio. They're unlikely to overlap editing the same files and create a mess. So it's totally fine for them to work in parallel. I'm going to go get a snack, go to the bathroom while I wait for this to finish. We'll see how long it takes. QWEN just barely finished. It took it about 15 minutes and it says it's all done. So I'm going to go back to the app in the browser. Okay, this is extremely disappointing. Doesn't look at all like what I was expecting. It looks terrible. If I mouse over on the top left corner, I do see stories and grammar guide pop up, but they're invisible until I click on them or until I mouse over them. When I click, they kind of work. Okay, grammar guide's not too bad, just the styling's terrible. That's actually okay. You might get frustrated right here and think it completely screwed up. It's not at all what I wanted. Well, something you need to understand is an AI only looks at words. It does not have eyes or a nose or a mouth. It can't smell, taste, or see. It doesn't know what's wrong unless you tell it what's wrong. A human just looking at the code also would not know it was wrong. They have to run the actual app. I could start by describing things that are wrong. For example, the stories, you have to mouse over it before it becomes visible. But I'm not going to bother with that. Instead, I'm just going to take screenshots. So I'll hit print screen, highlight it, save it to a new folder called broken app, and I'll delete these later. This is just so QWEN can understand what it looks like. And as I was taking a screenshot of the stories page, I realized something important. It's telling me, please select a language first. So I'm going to go back to home and pick a random language, and okay, now I have a start button, and now it takes me to stories and I have 3 different stories. So I initially thought it was completely busted and that it had completely forgotten to even create stories, but it actually made the stories. Like visually, they're not quite how I expected, but they're not completely wrong. So I'll keep going with the screenshots, but I'm actually hopeful that it's closer than I realized. So I'll do the cafe story. Okay, it has the same you walk into a cafe phrase that was in my other app. It has a listen talk button. It has the skill levels. So it definitely looks styled wrong, but it's functional. I even have voices I can pick. I can slide on the speed. I kind of doubt it'll actually play sound, but let's see. No, the buttons don't seem to work. So this is actually more promising than I thought. So now that I have all these screenshots taken, I have a decision to make. Obviously, I need QWEN to do a second round of changes. And that's what I mentioned earlier about updating the requirements doc. It was good I had Gemini analyze the wireframes twice and update the requirements doc, because an AI isn't always very thorough. It might miss things the first time, especially when you give it a really large task. But the second time you give it a task, it can see what it's already done and skip over those and just fill in the blanks of what it missed. The decision I need to make is whether the current short-term memory of the AI is going to be useful, or whether I should start a brand new AI session to clear its short-term memory. Because if it made mistakes the first time, it's going to remember the mistakes it made. And an AI essentially is a statistics engine. It looks for patterns in words. So there is a chance it tries to make the same mistake a second time because it remembers the mistake it made. As long as I explain what it did incorrectly, it should understand to ignore that and fix the mistake. So there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer here. I'll show you both ways to proceed. So first, I'm definitely going to want to make a commit to Git. So I'll right click, git commit. The best time to do this is anytime you've made a major code change especially one that the AI took a long time with. And the one rule is you only want to commit when you've made forward progress on the project. This app is ugly. It's got a lot of issues, but my previous version had no features at all. So even though this is bad, it's better than it was. So it's totally fine for me to commit. But if it was worse than it was before and I'd broken a lot of things, I would want to fix those before I commit. The reason is, for historical reasons, you always want the code to be progressing towards higher quality and never going backwards. Otherwise, if you revert back to an old version, it's hard to find the correct version to use. And if you're working on a team, when you break something, your commit will mess everyone else up also. So I mentioned earlier, when I commit, I can choose all the files. I don't really need these random screenshots because they're temporary. They're just to be the eyes for the AI so it can understand what mistakes it made. I don't need those for historical reasons. So I'll exclude those, but I will stage everything else. And obviously I could have told QWEN to do this for me. I'll just do it myself. Sometimes if the AI is only going to save you a few seconds, it's easier just to do it yourself. So I'll call this initial app UX for user experience. Okay, now I can go back to QWEN. And I could tell it to read the requirements document again because Gemini may have updated it since QWEN last read it, since I had that running in a separate terminal. And I could also tell it to read my broken app folder, which has all the screenshots. And I could say, please review screenshots to verify code changes you made are correct and fix everything to match the original requirements doc and screenshots I gave you. So with this prompt, it should make very good progress towards improving. And because I already committed, the only files left that are changed are just the files I don't care about that are screenshots. So I can see if its next set of changes make an improvement, and I can see what specifically it fixed. And if it still struggles to understand, I could get nitpicky and I could explain every little mistake. The stories menu on the left side is invisible until I hover over it with my mouse. But hopefully it figures those things out on its own. If I was worried that the short-term memory past context was going to be a problem, I could also just hit this trash can on this terminal or hit Control-C to close it. And I could make a brand new terminal with QWEN and give it the same instructions, but then it would start from a completely clean slate. It wouldn't know that it was the original coder. It would just read my files as if it's the first time I'd ever seen them. And sometimes starting from a fresh slate makes a big difference. I'll show you why. But while I'm explaining that, I'm just going to go back to the original terminal and hit enter so that it's always running in the background doing something while I'm multitasking. Let me explain the concept of context poisoning. This is why short-term memory matters and why it can mess up your response. So I've gone to Gemini's website. Every AI has the same problem, which is good and bad. If I click on the menu on the top left, you can see every conversation I've ever had with Gemini, unless I've specifically deleted it. So if I just ask Gemini, what do you know about me? It's going to look at every past conversation, tell you all this personal information about me. I'm 40 years old. This is where I live. I'm married, etc. That's a little bit personal. That's okay. I'm going to delete this message, but I'm going to keep the question. I'll copy the question. I'll delete this, and I'm going to click this private window right here, temporary chat. And now I'm going to paste it and ask. This erases its short-term memory. So here it says, I don't know anything at all about you. You're a stranger. Sometimes that's a good thing. And here's why. If I do a new chat and I don't click private and I say, I want to make an app that earns money. Can you make a suggestion? Remember that an AI is a pattern recognition algorithm. It's going to look at every word I've ever typed to it in the past that's in its memory, and it's going to statistically look at if those might be useful to respond to this answer. But it's also going to look at everything it's learned on the internet. So it's read every message on Reddit and YouTube and it has a general knowledge of the world. So when I want to earn money through an app, it might suggest something because it found it on Reddit, which could be useful, but it might suggest it because it's about me personally. What if my personal ideas are not very good? And what if they are not going to make money? So it might give me really bad suggestions. So I'm going to hit enter. Okay, so the very first suggestion it gives me, something about construction, DIY, do it yourself. And this is because I own a camping property just for my family, and I go out there and I work on solar panels, I'm remodeling my house, etc. Well, I don't know that that's actually a very good app at all. It may be completely useless, but it just thinks, oh, well, you have this hobby, maybe it's a good app. But if instead I do a temporary chat and I ask the same question, then the first thing it gives me is a freelance working app. Now, to me, if I think about which one has potential to make money, this is a way better idea. There's also a lot of competition, so it's not like an easy free win, but it actually feels like a developed idea. The other one didn't even make sense. Why does that matter? When you are in QWEN and you type a message like, teach me about Angular, QWEN is trying to write code for you, and you're derailing it by asking it irrelevant information. You definitely want to hit the plus sign and open a brand new terminal, because each instance of QWEN is going to have its own fresh memory, similar to the private chat I was having with Gemini. And this is going to be true of any AI agent you use, whether it's Gemini, QWEN, etc. So the other time it's valuable to start a fresh session is when you move on to a new task. So my app has features like hearing the audio or talking to the microphone to check your pronunciation. Those are completely different features that use completely different technologies. I want to focus on one task at a time, and I want the AI to also focus on that one task. I don't want to ask it to code two completely unrelated things. It'll confuse itself. I want one session for the one task. Once that task is done, I want to close it, start over with a new session, and move on to the other task. So in this case, I told it, you made a whole bunch of mistakes. Here's the screenshots, analyze what's wrong and fix it. That's probably fine to keep in the same session because the initial requirement was build the whole app, and now the update is you made some mistakes. It's still the same topic. It's probably fine. But I definitely wouldn't keep giving it screenshots in the same session and keep saying you made another mistake, you made another mistake. Once this scroll bar gets long, where it's done a lot of messages, and once I've asked it to fix the same mistake over and over again, if it's not being successful, I definitely want to just start a brand new session to clear its memory and start over. So while it's still going, let me show you a couple more tricks to help you when you're stuck. I mentioned that AI doesn't have eyes, so you need to take screenshots and tell the AI to look at the screenshots to see the mistakes it made. The other critical thing with coding is error messages. Error messages tell you everything about how to fix a mistake. In any technology you use, there should be a way to read the error messages, but they might be hidden somewhere. So if you don't know how to look them up, ask Gemini, how do I read the error messages? So in this case, an error message just barely popped up. So I'm going to take a screenshot of it. Because it's actually text, it's better not to get a picture of it if you can. It's better to actually highlight the text. Now, that error message appeared and disappeared quickly, and that's because QWEN is still in the middle of changing code. So it fixed the error message before I even had time to tell it what was wrong. The way in Chrome that you look at error messages is you right click and you say inspect, and it brings up this window. And then you click console and it will show you all the messages. So QWEN's not working anymore. It says it's finished with the updates. Let's first just see what improvements it made. If we remember the original screenshot, these language selections were much worse before. They look pretty good, but it did not figure out that these menu items on the left are invisible. So that's definitely something I should specifically tell it to fix. And again, it doesn't match my original app. Even though it recreated most of the same features, it chose to build it a little bit different this time. And that's because in order to fake creativity, AIs use random numbers so that when it has multiple options of what it could say, it will pick them randomly so that they're always different. And so even though I gave it instructions to build the same app, it chose to build it slightly differently. And that's okay. If I am very precise and I ask it over and over again to redo it and I tell it specifically what it did wrong, it will eventually get it to exactly what I want. It will have a tendency to add creativity if my prompts are not precise. So it also fixed this top header. A lot of those were invisible before, and now they're visible. Otherwise, I don't really see anything else that it changed. Everything else looks about the same. And that's kind of what I thought would happen. I really need to just close this session altogether and tell it to start over. So I'm going to hit the up arrow. I'm going to select the original text I wrote and right click to copy it. That way, if I make a brand new session, I can paste it easily. So I'll hit the trash can. You could also hit Control C and I'll start a brand new QWEN session. I'll paste in my message, and technically the broken app folder has outdated screenshots. I should take new screenshots, but I'm going to be a little bit lazy. Actually, I think I won't even send it the bad screenshots. I'm going to send it the requirements and the good screenshots. So these screenshots are from the original app that I'm happy with. So I'll say, please review these screenshots and requirements doc and update the code to match. This is a brand new conversation. It doesn't know it wrote any of this originally. This is like the first message it's seeing. But I also need to give it a starting point so it knows what app I'm talking about. Otherwise, it's just going to start reading every single file in my entire folder, which may have a lot of irrelevant information. Maybe I'll tell it to start at this index HTML file and at the angular.json file. If you know the basics of the technology you're using to code the app, you should probably know just like what's the starting file that points at all the other files. And if you didn't know that these two were the important ones, you could ask Gemini. So I'm going to hit enter on this, but this might take 15 minutes. We'll just see how much improvements it makes. And after this, I'll need to get specific. I'll need to go through the app and specifically say like the title here has overlapping text. I'll need to get specific, but hopefully it makes good improvements on its own. Now the app looks beautiful. So I mentioned the idea of creativity. I did not anywhere tell it to make a profile page, and I did not give it any wireframe or screenshot. It just decided on its own that apps should have profile pages. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but if I don't like it, I can tell it, hey, remove this. I didn't ask you to create that. Or I can give it feedback on what I like or don't like about it. It also made the settings page, which I didn't really ask for. But in some ways, some of these features are cool and better than my original app. It's okay to let it be creative and then be precise, telling it what you don't like so that it can remove that creativity. So let's open up this cafe screen again, see if it looks better. I would say it looks significantly better. Like the app almost feels perfect like the original. A lot of it's probably not functioning. Like if I click play, I doubt it's going to actually play any sounds, but that's okay. So that shows you the power of starting a brand new session so it can start over with a fresh slate compared to keeping the original session that made 100 mistakes and telling it, try to figure out the mistakes you made. Because with its statistics engine, it's going to see the original mistakes it made as a high probability of a correct response. So it's going to keep remaking those same mistakes over and over again. So if I were to continue working on this app, I'd want to hone in on individual features like just the play button or just the microphone button. Give the AI very specific instructions on just that one feature. Because right now I told it build the entire app. QWEN still has a bunch left to do. It's showing its to-do list. It's going to update the grammar guide, settings, translations, and this header up here. And I could totally let it keep going, and I'm sure it would do a great job. But I want to get back to troubleshooting bugs that don't make sense. Okay, so I'm going to intentionally create some bugs in the app just to show you how, without knowing how to code, you could have the AI diagnose the bug and fix it. Don't stress too much about how I'm creating the bugs, but I'll still explain it. So I'm going to right click on this next button and hit inspect. That takes me to this code, and I'm just going to double click this class and copy it. And then I'm going to click the search icon in Visual Studio Code. That will find me the button. And if I double click on it, I can see the code. So it says that the button becomes disabled if it's the last page. I'm going to intentionally break the logic of last page and see if the AI can figure out how to fix it. So I'll highlight it and copy, and then I'll hit Control F, which brings up this search menu, which takes me to the code. So something really simple I could do is I could just erase this equal sign, or I could change this greater sign to a less than sign. I could also modify this math of -1 and change it to like +3. Once I save, if I come back to the app, the next sign is disabled, even though I'm on the first page instead of the last. So I could start a new QWEN session, and I could just say the next button is disabled when it shouldn't be. And it will probably fix it. But I really should give it more of a hint, because inside the app, I know that this next button only appears if I'm in the reading page, and I don't want it to search my entire app because maybe there's more than one next button. So I really should do @reading, tell it that this is the specific page I'm talking about. But even still, this is not great because it requires it to read the file, find the logic, and analyze the logic mathematically to see if it's correct or not. And what if it's not obvious? Instead, what I should do is say, please add logging messages around the code so I can run the app and copy paste the diagnostic data back to you. So based on that prompt, it maybe will be an obvious fix, and it might ignore me and just use its creativity to just fix it. But hopefully it follows my instructions and adds the diagnostic data, because you need to remember the AI doesn't have eyes. It can only read words. So it can't see if the button is disabled or enabled unless I give it a way to see. So you can see now this diagnostic data showed up on the app here. I could screenshot that, or I could highlight it and copy it. I'm a little surprised it chose to put it visually on the screen instead of in this console window. But actually, when I right click and do inspect and look at console, it's actually there too. And that's a common place to see diagnostic information. So I'm just going to paste it all into QWEN. There's one set of diagnostic data, which was on the main screen. And here's the second set from the console. Right click that, copy, paste into QWEN. Because that one was really long, it doesn't show what I pasted. It just says that it's really long, but it'll be able to understand it. So I'll hit enter, and I'm not even going to tell it to fix the bug. I'm just going to hit enter. It'll understand that it's supposed to fix it because it's pretty good at guessing what you want. You could do this for something much more complicated. If you have an advanced algorithm that's doing a lot of formulas, for example, generating the audio in the Spanish language to play through the speaker is extremely complex. And you as a human are probably not going to understand it unless you've got a PhD in programming and studied that specific topic, but the AI understands it. The problem is if the AI makes a tiny mistake, it may not know what the mistake was. But if you tell it, create a whole bunch of diagnostic information, you can understand your own mistakes, and then you copy and paste that information, it should give it enough information to fix it. And you can see here, in this situation, it reverted my less than sign back to a greater than equal, and it reverted my +3 back to a -1. So it got it exactly correct. And if I go back to the app, the next button is fixed, but the diagnostic information is still there. So I would want to go back and say, it's fixed. Please remove the diagnostic messages. That's pretty much everything I wanted to show you. It's definitely not easy. You're still going to have to learn technical skills. It holds your hand the whole way to make it easier than it's ever been. If you refuse to give up and you're willing to just learn a little bit more every day and keep trying every time it fails, you'll eventually push through and have good results. And the more you practice with AI, the more you'll learn to talk to it in a way it understands so that it gives you good results the first time. The most important thing is when it fails, reading error messages carefully, trying to understand them. And when you're reading a relevant error message that the AI can't solve, make sure you are able to understand it. Any phrase or word you don't understand, research it separately until you understand the message, because once you understand the root problem, you'll be able to direct the AI better how to fix it, because most likely you're thinking about it the wrong way and giving bad instructions because you don't understand what's happening. Good luck out there. And if you build anything really cool, send me a link in the comments so I can check it out. Thanks and have a great day.